All right, welcome everyone. Welcome back to this next session, Teaching Personal Finance with Distance Learning, No Tech and Use Tech for K-8. I am so very thrilled to welcome Joe Schmidt, Maine's Social Studies Content Specialist. Joe joined us a few years ago. It feels like you've been here forever, Joe. But he was a social studies teacher, a high school teacher in Wisconsin, and 3 years was a teacher leader for the social studies curriculum and instruction in the public school district in Madison, Wisconsin. Joe serves on a number of national social studies boards and leadership positions. I'm not going to read his whole bio. We will certainly provide it to you. Joe also participates on the Maine Jumpstart board as well. And as I said earlier this morning, has done a phenomenal job in supporting educators throughout this transition to remote and distance learning. So welcome, Joe. We're so thrilled that you could be here today to provide some resources for our K-8 educators. Thank you so much. I'll turn it over to you now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everybody who is here for today's session. Like I said right before we hit record, I'm going to go ahead and just walk you through the different resources that are available on the DOE site, some of which are brand new in response to the distance learning piece, but I also want to get you grounded in just some of the basic pieces that are there, especially in light of the recent revisions, social studies standards revisions, which have put a greater emphasis and clarity around the teaching of personal finance here in Maine. So let's go ahead and get started. I do have them all tabbed out. These are all the different bookmarks or tabs we're going to look at today, but I like to try to show people where you can actually get to them. So if you are on maine.gov/DOE home, under teaching and learning, you'll see content areas and standards. If you scroll down, you will see social studies. And this will bring you to the current social studies page. Slightly redone with these times. There's this banner for the continuity of resources for teaching social studies. We'll talk about that a little bit. There's the professional development opportunity again on that headline page. I'm so super excited to talk with the different presenters we're going to have. I've really worked to line up some of my own personal heroes in social studies education. But if you want to see the different professional development opportunities that I'm hosting throughout May, the rest of May and into June, you can check that out. But what I really want to take you to is the standards and instruction page. This page did exist prior to the standards revision. It looked completely different. So last April 18th, when the standards were signed into law by Governor Mills, this page flipped into this new one. So a really quick breakdown of this page. You'll see at the top, I did a webinar about the standards revision overview. There's different mini sessions, just 2 or 3 minute pieces by some of the teacher leaders who were co-chairs of the writing process. There's different documents to help you based on the grade level you teach, the different topic strands you'd want to teach. Please know I was in the middle of uploading the personal finance rollout videos when COVID-19 hit. I just finished up the Maine Native American, but we do have videos from this fall as I hosted workshops to talk about the greater clarity and emphasis on personal finance. So please check back at some points when we can get caught up. Those videos will be there. And you do see a video from Sammy Drost, who we saw earlier. She's talking about some of the work she had done as well. So this is the very, very big picture of the revised social studies standards. But what I want you to be aware of, or we're going to focus on today, is this personal finance and economics page. So on this personal finance and economics page, you have Garrett Martin, who was one of the co-chairs with Sammy Drost and the revisions of that strand. You have his presentation. There is a link. If you click on this link, instead of having all 22 pages of the standards, you have just the personal finance and economic standards. Some of my favorite things in the entire website that were revised are on this page, because I love this piece from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, has done some research about what you need to be teaching kids and like what that looks like. So for example, since we're in a K-8 one, we'll start with this teaching elementary students. So there's 3 things that elementary students should be learning in terms of personal finance. They're financial habits and norms, financial knowledge and decision-making, and then executive function. So what does that mean? Well, what you want your students to demonstrate in terms of financial habits and norms are positive money attitudes, saving plans, spending plans, and math skills. And then on the right-hand side, they tell you, so what you can do to teach that. So if a student is not demonstrating positive money attitudes, what are the different things that you can do to support that? So there is this document, again, it walks through the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's research. There's a middle school one as well. What does it look like under financial habits and norms? What does it look like under financial knowledge and decision making? And what does it look like under executive function? So you see the similar, those 3 trends of skills that are building up. They do have resources in place about the tools to help support that. Down below on all of those content pages, so I've got the history page, the geography page, the civics and government page, and this one, these are kind of my best of potential resources. I like to say we're hitting a point now where the idea of Googling resources is probably not helpful because there's just so much, especially when it comes to in terms of personal finance, because after the financial crisis of 2008, so many economic and banking groups put so much money into this. So it can be difficult if you say, well, I want to I need some support for teaching personal finance. Where should I look? And if you just throw it into Google, you're gonna get a lot of resources back. So this is kind of my best of. These are the ones that I would say, like, for the most part, if you were to catch me out on the street and say, Joe, what are resources for teaching personal finance? These are the ones that I would start to list off, like, off the top of my head. These are the best, for me, the best ones. And again, depending on those grade levels. So you'll see like the St. Louis Federal Reserve has a K-12 scope and sequence document. So we're talking with a K-8 group right here. Even if you're not looking to redo your complete scope and sequence at your school, they do have those type of resources specific down into the elementary levels. Again, the United States Mint, free complete lessons for K-12, et cetera, et cetera. Probably my favorite is the Council of Economic Education has a page called Econ Ed Link. And you can search through those different grade bands. So if I'm a 3rd grade teacher, these are all of the different resources that they've put in for grades 3 through 5. And then you can start to search in, are you looking for a lesson? Are you looking for an activity? What is the concept that you'd like to work on with your kids? Now, obviously these concepts stretch all of them. So your 3rd graders might not come up with foreign exchange. So if you were to do a search for that, don't assume just because it's over there, they have all of them, but it does help you start to break down different specific lessons. So there's 11 pages here of resources to that. So you'd want to start to think about, is it a lesson? What am I talking about? So if we say a lesson for, I think I saw spending and savings. So I want to help my 3rd graders with a lesson on saving. We apply the filter. And so there's a lesson, the ABC of savings. So that ready-made lesson plan is there for you. Now, even that can be a little bit overwhelming. So one of the, my favorite things that I've made, I love this work, is there's the Maine Financial Literacy Framework and Resource Guide. This debuted about 2 years ago now. And it was, I made my note here that it says revised in the upper left-hand corner. It is the revised version of that. So with the standards. So we have an introduction into the importance of teaching personal finance. And it looks like it will take just a second to load. It's a large document. Mary did reference Emma's work earlier. Thank you to Emma. Emma continues to help me keep this updated as new resources come through. So here's some data as to why we should be teaching financial literacy. But then if you look at the Maine learning results, each of those grades has a performance indicator that talks about what personal finance would look like at that grade level. So if you're saying, okay, I'm in grade 2, it says they should understand the nature of personal finance as well as key foundational ideas by describing how planning for the future is important to managing money. So Joe, what does that mean? So what I did was I crosswalked it with the Jumpstart standards and said, okay, well, describing how planning for the future, to me that's investing, is important to managing money, that's financial decision making. So you'll see these ideas here: spending and savings, financial decision making, employment, income. Now it's all broken up. So if I'm the second grade teacher and I say, yeah, I want to talk about financial decision making, click on the bookmark. It will bring you to the K4, because that's how Jumpstart breaks it up: K4, 5, 8, and 9, 12. This will bring you to this section, because we're on page 10 of 39, about financial decision making for the elementary kids. And so it starts to give you more information. So the overall idea is to apply reliable information and systemic decision making to personal financial decisions. And it really starts to break it out, because we have that line that we walk in Maine, that things are very vague and nebulous. We heard that, I heard that frequently in talking about the standards revision. There's a local control component. So what does that mean? But sometimes things are so vague and nebulous, it's not helpful. Although you have this list, and this might be overwhelming, right? So this is that one idea of financial decision making for early elementary K4 students, right? Overall, it's got 6 points. There's separate standards that go under it. So this might be too much, right? So where is that sweet spot between the one statement we have in Maine and then all of this stuff? So the purpose of this is to really help you walk through what you're trying to get to. So I wanted my second grader to talk about financial decision making. On the left-hand side, it can give me some clarity about what that means. On the right-hand side, you'll notice there's resources, lesson plans. And this is based on what the organization said it was. So again, if I'm that second grade teacher, these are lesson plans that have been identified as K2, 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 that meet this financial decision-making piece. So if you kind of work backwards, if you're like, okay, Joe, well, the performance expectation said, describing how planning for the future is important to managing money. And then I went in and did one of these K2 lessons, you're probably hitting that performance expectation, because these lessons hit this financial decision-making part as identified by Jumpstart, and then as I crosswalked it back to the Maine learning results. And so again, it's broken out. There's lesson plans by different grades. There's lesson plans centered around a book, especially for our early elementary and elementary teachers. These will give you a book. If you're using Messy Bessie's Holidays, the book, then there's an accompanying lesson plan with it. Little Hen Makes a Pizza, etc. So it's not the book necessarily online, but if you have the book or were using that book or wanted to acquire that book, they have an accompanying lesson plan. There's a section of games and activities. Again, appropriate by the different grade level. So you see FAMES, Cash, and Max. There's coloring books, there's teaching guides, there's a lemonade stand, Ben Knows Money, etc. Different resources. So these are places, they're not exactly a lesson plan, but Kiddonomics is a whole curricular set from the Federal Reserve for kindergarten. FDIC has the Money Smart Guide. And then here are resources that are based in Maine. So Junior Achievement has an Ourselves program for kindergarten, Our Families for First, etc., etc. So again, trying to narrow down that scope of the potentially tens of thousands of resources available to just that specific piece. I teach this grade level. I want to get, and you can navigate here. So if I'm elementary, or let's just talk about middle school since this is K-8. I'm middle school spending and saving. I'm going to go to that bookmark. I'm starting to narrow down. I want to talk about spending and savings. You can just see, here's my middle school. I've narrowed it down to, what is that, about a dozen lesson plans or so, or a couple of activities. Trying to narrow that net, that if you cast it, it could almost be too wide. So again, this resource can be found on the Personal Finance and Economics Strand page, along with this list of potential resources. Now, before I go into some of the new resources that have been created in the past 6 weeks or so. I'll just pause if anybody has any questions. I do not see any in the Q&A section, and I have not seen any in the chat either, but I do want to pause if anybody did want to ask. You usually say I'm really, really good with wait time, but it's really bad when you can't see a single face in the webinar feature. All right, well, feel like you can continue to put in questions if one does come up. So now I'm going to direct you to, if we go back, and if you've noticed on the banner on every single DOE page, there's this Maine Department of Education coronavirus update. And so we have new resources that have been produced. I'm going to show you this parents one first. This is the latest edition that we've had, and it's supporting tips and parents and families and caregivers in a variety of different ways. But one of the things you'll see here is a resource toolkit, and there's a PK through 5, and then a 6-12. I know we've got both of those in there. So in this PK through 5, this grade span, these are online educational resources. You'll see it again on another one of my web pages, kind of the same thing, but a little different spin. These are ones that have been created specifically by these organizations to support caregivers, parents, families in the current learning environment. And so one of those is junior achievement for K-5. So each elementary lesson access short videos and at-home activities. Each program includes 2 video options for each of the 5 sessions and accompanying activity. JA recommends that a caring adult watch the video and help guide the child through the activity. So this is really done in a way to support non-educators or students at home working through these resources. Because we have, there's always traditionally been a lot of educator resources, but what we're finding right now is for a variety of reasons, you know, parents are having to take on such a role in the educational piece that we're looking for ways to make sure that we're supporting them specifically, or parents or families or caregivers. And so I just wanted to point out that in one of these places, where we go, here we go. In this whole parent page, there is these online educational resources, and junior achievement is in both the K-5 and then the 6A1 as well. In here, we also have some different resources that were made across the department teams. So if you look at these interdisciplinary learning experiences, again, they would be ideas that families could be doing that would cross many content areas. I can tell you the one that I was kind of the lead author on is this Ancient Times newspaper. And it's the idea of a student studying Greek or Roman times instead of the or names or dates or stuff like that, that it would be the building of a newspaper that would have all the components that a newspaper would have. And if you think about all the different things that show up in a newspaper, there is personal finance in there. Like I put it as part of an advertisement for the sale of a parcel of land, include cost per square foot and an image of the land, loan information and costs at different percentage rates showing that impact of compound interest. So this would be a bigger newspaper, but again, where does personal finance fit? If they were to complete this entire newspaper, they would be doing math, personal finance, science, engineering, drawing, music, world language, social studies, ELA, all into this one project here. Okay, so out of the parents page then, if we go back, and it's across all these different banners, there's the view resources for schools. You'll see these content resources in the middle. On the left-hand side, you'll see Commissioner Makin's updates as all the information continues to come up. But if you come through on the social studies page, I'm going to show you the different stuff. So this is the continuity of learning / social. So this is a brand new page that debuted less than 2 months ago. Some things to look at on here. One, I just talked about the parent page that the Department of Education had made. I have a similar one with ones that really have a focus on social studies. So there's the Maine PBS, the learning space. There's calendars that I really like. I think this is fun. There's so many online and virtual events. Wide Open Schools and Learning Keeps Going. You'll see both of those highlighted on the DOE parent page. But then there's other things, Smithsonian Education, Gilder Learman, Osher Maps. And then again, for the personal finance components, I did bring over those junior achievement videos as well. The actual first things that showed up on this page were these lesson plan examples as integrated units of study across the 4 content areas. So right now I want to focus on this personal finance and economics example. So this idea of putting this together was like, what would be a project-based learning experience that would be accessible and could be differentiated at all sorts of different grade levels. So if you are a teacher of elementary or middle school or high school, there would be different ways that you would want to differentiate this for your students. And then there's the interdisciplinary approaches, as well as if you have students that lack access to technology, one way to do it, or if you have students who are using technology, there's another way to approach the work as well. So if I just walk you through this, each of these 4 different lesson ideas are based on that really key, just research proven best practices. And so in the personal finance and economics, it's a combination of the Council of Economic Education and then Jumpstart standards in both economics and personal finance, just really, really boiled down. So that idea right now, if you had one more project that you'd get to work with your students on for kind of the rest of the year, what are the absolute key components you would want them to get in terms of personal finance and economic learning? And I've had a lot of discussions with teachers, you know, if we had them for the entire semester, right, there's a lot of things we'd want to go really deep into. We'd want them to, you know, potentially fill out a W-2 and a W-4. We want to do this or that. But at this point in this environment, the idea is less is more, and just really what are those key ideas that regardless of what their next grade is or what their next class is, what would you want them to take away? And so for me, I focus on the idea of scarcity of money. I used to teach an economics class, a high school economics class, and the entire semester was balled up into that one question, is how do we deal with scarcity? Because it's a money issue, it's a time issue, it's a resource issue, it's an everything issue. That's what we're having to make decisions. And that's what I would continue to always come back to the kids about, that money decisions would be really easy without scarcity. If we had plenty of money, right? And we talk then about inflation. Everybody's like, well, why don't we just give everybody $1 million? So we'd have to talk about inflation and the cost of stuff. But if there was enough money and enough resources and everybody could have whatever they wanted, then you don't have economics and personal finance because there's no decision-making component to it. So thinking about that scarcity of money, starting with the idea of just the needs and everything they would want. Really simple. And again, elementary can do this, middle school, high school, and you could put in whatever guidance you wanted for your students. But once they came up with a list of everything that they would want to spend money on, can they identify needs and wants, and can they identify goods and services? And again, depending on the grade level, depending on the access to technology, I mean, this could just be a handwritten list. It could be an entire digital presentation. It could be a video, it could be an audio, again, depending on your students and that tech access. So then ask the student to determine how much all of the items on the list cost. And again, what's appropriate for your grade level is going to be based on you and your kids. Those younger students are probably going to need help figuring out those costs with support of family members. But one of the really neat no tech ideas is, I know one teacher had reached out to her local grocery stores and got extra copies of their flyers and then sent them home so that every kid had access to grocery store flyers from the newspaper. So that they were, it was a similar topic, they were working on a food budget, but you can look for newspaper flyers or ads, right? If there's absolutely no even internet technology in that, there's a way to provide some of those costs for different things. And again, maybe with younger kids, it's the idea of creating a budget for the meals for the week. And if it's an older kid, you know, it's the everything on your list. But the idea is with this math component, add it all up, and then what is the percentage of stuff? Is my cell phone bill a big percentage? Is it the food I eat, right? I've heard from a lot of people that everybody's eating a lot of food now, so their food budgets have gone up. So what is that percentage in there? And again, appropriate for grade level, but an interdisciplinary integration of math. So you want them to just work through and have to see, here's all of the costs of everything that they have. Now you're going to want to then give them a budget. This budget should preferably cover the cost of most or all of the needs, but not enough to cover the cost of everything on the list. I don't think you want to set up and be like, oh, I'm sorry, you don't have enough money for food and rent, you're in trouble, right? To try to give them that buffer. And again, depending on your kids, if they're older kids and have that access to technology, can they look at careers? Can they look at hourly wages? Can they actually do like a wages calculator? Or here's a link to an online budget calculator where you put in all these different things. Again, that can be differentiated out depending on your students. But it's still that idea of starting to make decisions. Which of the things will you not be able to purchase? And again, if you want to do some interdisciplinary, you could do some career and economic development piece. What type of jobs? What is your budget going to be based on your job? What happens if you go to tech school or go to the military or get a master's degree? How do those different things change, some of those earning potentials, and have them explore that as well. Once they decide what their budget looks like, you have to have the idea of make sure you pay yourself. So what is the long-term planning and or short-term planning for something they would like to buy? What's something they didn't have the budget for? A toy, shoes, a car. And what's the longer term piece of saving for college or saving for retirement even potentially, and helping them understand both short-term and long-term planning. And then how do you get that? How do you set aside money in order to get in these ideas? And again, with a tech, you can play an investment simulation game. With no tech, it can be written with a lot of math, looking at compound interest or returns, right? I know yesterday's FinCamp explored some of these as well. But then once they figured out what their budget looks like, how they're going to save for those stuff, have them start to explain the why, the rationale, the decision-making piece. Why did you choose this over this? With older kids, you could start to get into advertisements and incentive programs. These are all things that are part of the world around us that we run into all the time. Even young kids, if you start to give them certain advertisement jingles, they can finish the sentence, right? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Because advertisements are so prevalent in our society. And I was in a discussion one time where I said, you could just have people look around their house. Do you have a magnetic calendar on your refrigerator from a local company, right? With their logos in that bottom left-hand corner or the bottom right-hand corner, logos on clothing, shoes, groceries, all this stuff, right? Like we're branded inside and out. And how does all of that play a role? Did any of that play a role in your decision-making process? Is that something you want to do? And you could have kids writing script and performing, singing songs, writing jingles, doing videos. They could have them make their own commercial to think about those key ideas that drive some of our decision-making process. That's why we have advertisements, because it does make a difference. And it might even just be as simple as a punch card, right? Buy 9 donuts, get your 10th one free. Your little punch card programs and cards. And then think about, is there a career plan involved with this? So if you kind of get through it and you're like, ooh, but I would like to spend more. I'd like to have more money. What are things that they can do right now? And it doesn't always have to be this big, right, explore, claim your future from Maine. It doesn't have to be, what is my job going to be? They could also just come up with their own ideas. My oldest at one point ran a lemonade stand outside of our house. And the very first day, she made like $80, and one guy came by and dropped off $20 for one, quarter cup of Kool-Aid. And so she was super excited because now she was going to make $80 a day. But then by the time the second day, right, sales had come down. It wasn't necessarily, as cute or, whatever. We started talking about weather and driving and weekends. By the third day, I said, you're going to have to start paying for some of these products, right? When it was the fun first little, here's the Kool-Aid we have on hand. Here's the sugar we have on hand. But now when we're running to the store to buy $10 worth of Kool-Aid and cups and sugar, right? Then we said, well, you have to pitch in. You have to pay for this, and helping her understand. And so by the time like that third or fourth day, it was not nearly as fun anymore because her profit margins had come way down. The sales weren't up. It was long, hot days with not as many people stopping, right? Because everybody in the neighborhood did it once. But is there ideas like that where even before thinking about post-secondary, post-high school potential careers, is there something they could do like that? Mowing lawns, trimming hedges, whatever it might be. And so if you bundle up all this different stuff, if you take them on this big path about how they interact with money and make decisions with money, you really hit on the biggest key concepts that are identified by the Council of the Council of Economic Education and Jumpstart in both personal finance and economics. And so there's one project, again, differentiated out based on your kids, the grade level you're at, the technology access that they have, depending on how many different things you want to bring in, how many writing parts, how many math parts, how many career parts, all those different things are all bundled into there. So this was kind of the first idea we came out. Less is more, be the link, don't share the link. Instead of giving you 20 links to all the different stuff. Thank you for the shout out, Joe, you're welcome. How do you make sure that students are still getting the education that they need and kind of bundled up in those clear things? So in terms of also working through to minimize stuff, Sue, love the resources. Don and I just got extra time in the day to deliver these standards. We need to work with colleagues. Hold on one second, I'm reading Sue's question. Is there a resource to suggest these integration points? For example, U.S. Revolution links to breakout lesson on taxes. Sue, I think if I'm understanding your question, I would say that there is not a piece that would have that, just because in the large part, there is no kind of consensus on a scope and sequence and that type of stuff. I do think if you start to look at a lot of what's in that framework, all of the different parts and lessons that I put in there, I think a lot of them do tie into other things. You heard Commissioner Macon saying, right, like a lot of times it's not just a simple standalone personal finance lesson all by itself. Those are those different pieces. And I think it's just that idea of what parts do you go deeper in and what parts do you maybe not quite get so deep into. So if you're talking about the Great Depression, where is your focus on? Is it a focus on FDR fireside chats? Is it, you could do a propaganda piece in looking at the Public Works Administration recruitment posters, or you could go a deeper dive into the stock market, unemployment rate, inflation costs and stuff like that. So maybe thinking about what are the different ways the topics can be addressed, and then what are I like how you said, the breakout lessons, right, to take them through, and then the potential of maybe where are students finding their own interesting piece. So maybe what I oftentimes suggest, and I'll try to do it as a Great Depression example, if you're going to spend 2 weeks on the Great Depression, how do you change what's in that specific 2 weeks initially? And what can you kind of cut off? Like, what are the absolute basic parts of the Great Depression? And I always talk, like in the Civil War, we usually teach it in 3 to 4 weeks, and you can't teach the Civil War in 3 to 4 weeks. You are teaching parts, you are making decisions. And I think a lot of times if you really, really just narrow down to the absolute must know of, in this example, the Great Depression, it starts to free up time for students to go do those breakout different lessons without needing to add more time to the lesson, right? So instead of 2 weeks on the Great Depression, if you say, well, I'm going to do these 3 or 4 days, they really, really need to do this. We're going to do an inquiry day. And then the students that want to go deeper into here, they're going to do a propaganda piece. These are going to do speech writers. These are going to do unemployment and inflation or sales. You can break them out in those different ways. So I think a lot of times, without a specific guidance piece, I think if we really just stop and think about a unit, that what are the absolute essential must-haves, and again, my default is always the Civil War. How many battles and generals do students actually need to know from that piece, and how much of it is kind of that traditional, well, you do Fort Sumter, then you get to Bull Run, then you get to, right, we just work our way through, and how many of those, if we pull it away, do we add time back in to get to break out those type of pieces? So I hope that somewhat helps with that, Sue. I don't think I have the specific resource that you're thinking of, but maybe just that different way of thinking. So again, in the idea of less is more, one of the first resources, thank you, you're welcome, Sue. I created this tech-based curricular resources sorted by grade band and content strand. And again, if you go out there and try to search for stuff, this even narrowed it down more. I showed you the page earlier if the links are the best. But this was the idea of all the grade levels. And again, so we've got middle school people in here. If I'm a middle school person, 6'8", wanting to talk about personal finance and economics, here are, what is that, 7 bullet points. If I'm 3'5", here's, I think, 8 or 9. And you bring into this, and now you'll see, well, Joe, the framework's in there, but then you'll see econ ed link, which I talked about earlier. And what I've done in here is if you follow the direct link, I'm trying to help you navigate their webpage. If you notice, I took you right to the specific 6'8" page, and you have the same thing for 3'5" and K2, math and economics. Economics is everywhere. I tried to help you navigate some of those different type of pieces. So with so many resources out there, I didn't want someone to go to a major resource and then feel like you were clicking around and getting lost, right? The idea of the less clicks, the better. So these are some of those just very, very straightforward links right into those resources. The last thing I'm going to show you, because I believe 9:45 is my end time, is we did do, and it's backlinked on this page, this low tech and no tech. And so we'll start here with the pre-K through 6. And kind of a little bit more finite or fine tuning of some of those grade level pieces. And again, it's personal finance and economics has its own little strand. And it's the idea of if students don't have access to a specific technology or Google Classroom, or even trying to work around some of the idea of mailing different packets home. So you'll see using a specific budget for either a day or a week, plan meals for your family, figure out what the meals can be. Track how many commercials or advertisements that the student sees each day, and what do they say to get you to buy their product. Create a crossword puzzle, including different personal finance and economic terms that you know. Write them stuff backwards. If they know the word, do they know what the definition or the term is that goes with it? So that's the 4 through 6, grades 1 through 3. Track the food that is eaten during the day using a grocery store flyer, look it up, compare and contrast different prices, create a plan for saving. And I'm trying to not read all of them out loud, but if you see, this idea is something students could do, and there's no links involved anywhere. So if students don't have access to technology, you'd be okay with that. And then there is the similar piece, because I know this is the K-8. So on this end, we had for 7th and 8th graders, personal finance. So you see that idea of a short-term and long-term plan, create their own incentive and rewards program. I've seen on social media people responding to all their kids at home eating so much that you open up the pantry and it's like $1 for a granola bar and $2 for a cookie or whatever it is. And then next to it, it says you can earn $1 by emptying the dishwasher, by raking the lawn, or mowing the lawn, by raking the leaves, by cleaning your room, right? They're doing economic systems in their own homes as part of that incentive program as well. So coming back again, the main page you'd want for this is maine.gov/DOE/continuity of learning/social. This is really my central piece for everything currently related to the remote or distance learning. There is a professional development page where I've been running webinars, and I'm happy to say that Mary she did one right here. So under state organizations, resources for teaching personal finance and economics, Mary did an hour session with us and then listed out a bunch of resources as well. So basically, again, all the resources that have been done up in the past 6 to 8 weeks, you can find connected through this one page, though I would definitely not want you to forget about just the regular social studies page and then the standards and instruction page as well. What questions do you have for our remaining time?
Thank you, Joe. That's great. One of the questions that came up in the Q&A was about, there was a comment about the challenge for a lot of educators that there's just, especially at the K-8 level, because they're teaching multiple subjects in many cases, and that there's just not enough time in the day to incorporate some of this content. And so the question was around whether or not you are aware of any resources or are looking at developing any resources where these concepts would be integrated throughout other content areas. Perhaps you could speak to that a bit.
Yep, and I thought I grabbed that in real time. Sue's question, she did say thank you. I think I answered. If there
you may well have. You may well have.
I was trying to keep it up in real time. Sue, if I missed that, or if there's other people who want more with that, please let me know. That's where I went on my little soapbox about figuring out what's truly important, see if you can cut out some days and give some student choice. But the short answer is a specific list with those integrating points. I would say no, just again, there's such a wide variety of scope and sequence in Maine that is one of the challenges that we do have is when people are looking for specific resources, it's hard to adapt because 7th grade or 5th grade can be such a wide variety all over the state.
A question that I have, Joe, just curious and hoping you can share with the group, the digital or virtual resources that you've been offering, the PD that you've been doing.
Yep.
Do you anticipate when the school year starts up and when we're back in the classroom to continue to offer some level of these sessions ongoingly next academic year?
Absolutely no idea. Right now, my planning, I'm happy to say that I've got things scheduled out through June 11th, which is going to be the last day I'm going to offer it. I've got about 4 or 5 more slots that I'm going to try to fill. If you look at this page here of things that are scheduled out. And then at that point, and I actually don't have the latest ones in there. I think everybody's going to take some time this summer to reset and think a little bit. One thing that I had actually been considering before all of this was the idea of office hours every other week or once a month or something like that, just having that open Zoom for people to come into. I think at the very least an idea of like that will continue. I think we're gonna have to see. I know that a lot of the phase 2 of the standards, revised standards rollout had been put on pause. I ended up canceling 4 regional sessions about the implementation piece, and people are asking if that will continue in the fall, so that may or may not be in a virtual setting as well. But I think you heard Commissioner Macon say, I don't think there will ever be a complete replace of in-person face-to-face, although I think this has really, opened a lot of potential on some things. So I think you'll see something, but I can't really speak too much yet.
Great, thank you, Joe. Just checking now for any open questions and avoiding asking you the same question again.
That's okay. I was trying to stay on my toes and answer them in real time. So.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Appreciate that. Just take a look. I think we're all set for questions for right now. Any last thoughts you'd like to share as we conclude, Joe? This has been wonderful, great resources and information. Anything that you'd like to close with?
That I would like to close? Or are you asking for questions or if I have any final?
Just any final thoughts or comments that you may have.
I guess I'll echo a lot of what Commissioner Macon had said, and she'd kind of alluded, to in my role and others like my role, just how many teachers we've gotten to interact with. I feel like I have a whole set of new best friends that I have yet to even meet in person before. But just thank you to everybody who's working so hard, those who are attending the sessions, those who are reaching out and asking questions. It definitely is a labor of love at this point, but it's so nice to see how hard people are working in the dedication. And And I think we're starting to hit that point where people are getting their ground. And I know my end, like the production of resources has slowed down. But it was just, I'm so happy that I think the department did a great job of pivoting ahead of things and trying to be very, very proactive into what are the challenges you guys are facing now, because I do know in talking with colleagues across the states, a lot of people did well, here's 100 links. How can we help you? And I think we shifted really early. And I just appreciate the work that not only the department has done, but a lot of the teachers, again, that I've worked with. But if you ever need anything at any time, please just reach out to me. I'm happy to help. And again, trying to put as many resources out there as possible for you to use. And you are welcome, Nikki. I see in the chat.
Lots of many thank yous in the chat, Joe. So we're thrilled that you were able to be here. And for folks, and you know, as you're looking at the schedule and the K-8 tracks and 9-12, Joe will also be presenting in the 9-12 track this afternoon at 1:20. So he'll be doing a version of this presentation for high school educators as well. And again, this is recorded, so we'll be able to share it with folks outside of that. So thank you so much, Joe, not only for this, for being here today, and for all of the support that you've provided for, you know, to educators and to Maine Jumpstart as we planned this digital event. So thank you so much for helping out.
Absolutely. I think it's going great so far. So
yeah, so far so good. So I think I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording.